Hello and welcome to another planning appeal case study video. I'm John Peters, and in this video I'm going to explain how we overcame a recent refusal by Greenwich Council for one of our clients. This planning appeal was to overcome the refusal for a single-storey extension and a double-storey side extension that was refused by the local authority Greenwich Planning Department. Our client was initially booked in for a free no obligation consultation to run through the refusal reasons that have been used by Greenwich Council and to evaluate if an appeal was viable or if an alternative option would be best suited for them. The free no obligation consultation, which took around 15 minutes, found that this case was viable for appeal to the Planning Inspectorate, taking the decision process away from Greenwich Planning Department. This case was refused by Greenwich Council for the following reasons. The proposed Part 1, Part 2-storey rear and side extension, considered cumulatively by reason of the positioning of the side extension element and the excessive bulk and scale to the rear extension element, will constitute a dominant, unsympathetic and uncharacteristic addition and would result in the creation of a terracing effect and the unbalancing of a pair of semis which the development forms part. As such, the development would cause harm to the character and application site and the character of the surrounding area more widely. The planning inspector in this case identified the main reason for the case was the effect of the proposed development on the character and appearance of the area. The inspector stated the following in the appeal decision. The appeal site forms one of half of a pair of two-storey semi-detached dwellings. The wider character of this part of the road is defined by some diversity in materials and layout, which broadly includes two-storey terrace blocks of 4 dwellings and semi-detached dwellings. While there are gaps between the buildings, some of the dwellings have been extended to the side at the single storey to both the terrace and semi-detached blocks. Additionally, I noted the existing two-storey side extension. It is proposed to be built a two-storey side extension to the host building at the appeal site. It would be set back from the existing front elevation, and the ridge line of the proposed roof would be lower than the existing ridge line. A single-storey rear extension is also proposed, and this would run along the rear of the host building and the rear of the proposed two-storey side extension. I accept that the two-storey side extensions can have a greater impact upon street scene when compared to rear extensions. In this case, careful consideration of the appeal scheme, including its proportions and its impact on the rhythm of the open views between the buildings, is important. The proposed development takes some of the design cues from other houses in the road. Several of these proposed design features of the appeal scheme also accord with the Royal Borough of Greenwich Urban Design Guide Supplement Planning Document 2023, such as its modest width and set back off the side extension with its lower ridge line when compared to the host building. For these reasons, the proposed development would remain secondary in scale and relation to the host building. Additionally, while the symmetry of the pair of semi-detached dwellings would be altered, given the design features set out above, the side extension as proposed would not harmfully unbalance the pair of semis. The proposed side extension would, however, reduce the gap between this and the neighbouring property. The rhythm of space within the street scene has some variation due to the interchange between terrace buildings and semi-detached buildings, offering an interesting contrast within the street scene. The differing proportions of existing buildings and the resulting space therefore create some diversity without harm to the overall proportions of buildings and rhythm of the spaces within the street scene. Setting aside the neighbouring property, I appreciate that two-storey side extensions are not broadly characteristic of the area, given the proposed design features as set out in the preceding paragraphs, as well as the established street pattern. The proposed side extension would nevertheless add some interest to the character and appearance of the area. This would therefore integrate coherently into the local, limiting any negative terracing effect or loss of open character between buildings. However, the supplementary planning document also sets out that extensions beyond this limit may be considered if neighbourly amenity is not compromised and that other roof forms can be considered. In this case, the council raised no objection regarding neighbouring amenity, and having reviewed the scale, size and proximity to the proposed rear extension to the neighbouring properties, I am inclined to agree. The rear element of the proposal would have limiting visual impact from the street scene or any other public vantage point by reason of its position beyond the existing dwelling and the proposed side extension. The garden is also of a generous size to accommodate the extension, given I have found that the side extensions would respond appropriately to the streetscape. Any harm generated from the proposed rear element of the extension in character and appearance terms would be offset by the reasons set out previously. Tying these considerations together, I found the proposed side and rear extensions to be acceptable when considered cumulatively, and proposed development would be sympathetic to the locality and thus would not harm the layout or spatial character of the area. Therefore, the proposed development would not appear as a dominant, unsympathetic or uncharacteristic addition. The appeal scheme would have an acceptable effect on the character and appearance of the area, complying with relevant provisions of policies. These, amongst other things, look to promote high quality design which responds to local distinctiveness and legibility of place. From that, we can clearly see that the inspector has gone into detail through our planning appeal statement that was produced for this case and has then visited the site. Many of you who have similar refusals are repeatedly stating to us that you've had little or no correspondence throughout your application process. The first thing you knew was receiving the refusal notice from the council, and in some cases when you receive a letter from ourselves. We completely understand that the planning process can be very frustrating. The costs involved, the time it takes and so on. But do remember, we deal with this on a daily basis for others just like yourself. With planning appeals, experience really does matter. Our specialist appeals team, who handle over 2.5% of all planning appeals in England and Wales that are currently produced and submitted, start by producing a comprehensive and robust appeal statement that in this specific case covered 32 pages, was just over 7,500 words. It's important to detail in an appeal statement where the local authority failed in their assessment of the case and how, where possible, both local and national policies apply in favour of the appeal. Additionally, if possible, bringing in similar cases that the Planning Inspectorate found in favour of at the appeal. Obviously, with the back catalogue we have of wins, we're able to use these cases and what the inspector said in them as additional argument to support the case we are working on. Once an appeal statement is completed, we send the documents to our client, asking them to check that they're happy for us to submit the case. If we need to add any additional information that the client may have forgotten previously to supply, it's done at this point and the case is then submitted. It is vitally important that all documents and responses are submitted on time throughout the appeal process, as failure to do so will result in the appeal not being successful, something we hear about often when people attempt an appeal for the first time themselves. Always ensure you use a professional who has considerable experience of appeals. It is worth asking them for some recent successful planning appeal case studies like you'll find on our website. Due to the large number of cases we represent, we have a dedicated team that liaises with the Planning Inspectorate on a daily basis. For this appeal, an independent planning inspector from the Planning Inspectorate visited the site on the 23rd of January, and we're pleased to confirm that the appeal was upheld and the permission granted on the 5th of February in a 3-page appeal decision notice. If you'd like to find out if we can help you with your planning appeal, complete our online form on our website, www.planningappealsuk.com, and our UK support team will arrange for a free, no obligation consultation with one of our planning assessment professionals. Thank you for taking the time to watch this planning appeal case video, and I look forward to producing another one very shortly. Bye for now.